This theremin is an unrestored theremin, a Teletouch, the only one known to exist. What's a Teletouch? A Teletouch is a theremin made by Leon Theremin's own company in New York City in the 1930s. The company was apparently primarily focused on things other than theremins, but they did make at least one or two theremins, of which this is the sole known example. And it's kind of neat because it's fully documented and it's completely original. It's never been restored. In fact, it's not in playing order right now. I may fix it someday, but I'll only fix it enough to make it play like it did originally. I don't think I want to improve upon it. So it's another thing that's interesting about this is that the cabinet was made by the same man that made Clara Rockmore's theremin cabinet. So there's a certain resemblance in the style, the rounded corners, the black lacquer finish. This is on a totally enclosed base. The base is hollow, contains the amplifier and the loudspeaker. The loudspeaker's on the rear side here. So I'll just give this a quick spin around so you can see. I don't think this is the best arrangement for a theremin, for the thereminist, but well, you know, when you play, then the tone is projecting out towards the audience, so the audience gets to hear the instrument better than the player does. I'm not sure that's a great idea. So, how did this thing survive from 1939 to 1998 in original condition? It's because I'm only the third owner. Mr. Nickert in Philadelphia, who was one of the original owners of an RCA theremin. He bought an RCA in 1930. He loved his RCA. And when he heard that Professor Theremin had a company, he decided he would get a new improved theremin. And he did so. It was delivered in July of 1939. Mr. Nickert was already 64 years old, a retired banker by that time. Here's the original bill of sale for this instrument. And as you see, he traded in his RCA. They gave him a $75 credit for the Teletouch. Mr. Nickert took delivery of the instrument. And by the way, Leon Theremin did not actually build this instrument. In fact, I doubt he ever saw it because we know he left New York in 1938. But his company continued to make products, and they used his name on the letterhead. It says Director of Research, Leon Theremin. So Mr. Nickert got his new Teletouch Theremin and was vastly disappointed with it. As I understand it, it sounded a lot like a flute. It didn't have the body of tone, the presence that an RCA has. So Mr. Nickert was never too happy. In fact, he was so unhappy that he immediately sought out and bought another a used RCA, and he played that for the rest of his life. In fact, in this 1956 picture here, he's playing an RCA. He loved to record his own piano accompaniment on his tape recorder, and then he would have an accompanist to play along with on the RCA. And he gave lots of little public performances and demonstrations of the instrument. Well, in 1964, Mr. Nickert was, how old was he then? He was 84, 86, something like that. Pretty old. And he sold the instrument to my friend Howard Mossman in Swarthmore, Pennsylvania. And Howard is a theremin fan from way, way back, from when he was a teenager. And Howard had a Melodia. And when Nickert saw that, he was pretty impressed because here was a little transistorized theremin, something a lot easier to move around than an RCA. And he says in this letter that he says, first of all, I want to express my pleasure at meeting you. I was as much intrigued with your late model theremin as you were with my Teletouch model. So the long and short of it is that Howard was able to trade his Moog Melodia for this theremin. And Howard Mossman kept this theremin in perfect condition, unrestored condition, for 30 years, over 30 years. And just recently, a few months ago, sold it to me. And I promised him that I would restore it someday and then send him a tape recording with sound. So I'm sorry it's not restored now for him to hear on this tape, but you'll get to hear it someday. So what I'd like to do next is, let me turn around once more. I'll show you the inside of the instrument. We'll take the chassis out. First, the back panel slides out. This is a very clever way of doing it, I think. No hinged doors like an RCA. It slides down. It's a lightweight plywood panel, and I'll probably drop it on the floor. There we go. Okay, so there's the theremin mechanism. Not of the same quality of construction as an RCA by any means. This large coil here is the volume resonant coil. This small coil is the pitch resonant coil. And then the oscillator coils under here. I do not think they are RCA style. They're certainly not Professor Theremin's design. And this loosely follows the design principles in Clara Rockmore's instrument, but it doesn't have any of the workmanship or the finely handmade components that her instrument has. Alright, so I've just removed the chassis. It slides out on that wooden shelf. And the inside of the cabinet is pretty simple. It's made of a high grade of plywood. And interestingly and conveniently, this lifts off, and it's very light in weight. I like the way this was constructed. It's a good method. What remains in this base is the loudspeaker. And there's another chassis in here. That chassis is the audio power amp and the rectifier tube and the big power transformer. And in a sense, this parallels Clara's theremin, which has a separate chassis holding the power tubes. And this is put down in the base to get it out of the way, and so the heat won't affect the sensitive theremin circuitry above to any great degree. This is an original permanent magnet speaker from 1939. It was a very newfangled thing back then. Most loudspeakers of that period had a big electromagnet to energize the speaker cone. But this is one of the very first modern speakers, and fortunately it's in perfect condition. This is going to make an easy restoration job. Okay, now we'll take a look at the chassis. The chassis, as you see, is not nearly as elaborate as the Stout or even an RCA. And it's kind of cute because it has penciled markings on it, presumably from the original owner's hand. This instrument was handmade by Leon Theremin, Teletouch Corporation, NYC, 1939. Well, I don't believe it. But it was made by his company, and Theremin did have something to do with this design. But by the time this was built, Theremin was long gone, so the engineer in charge probably felt quite free to cheapen the design and inject his own ideas into the construction. These cables are kind of in the way. These are shields to keep these separate oscillator tubes electrically isolated from each other, because they put out fields that might interfere otherwise. This is an old repair. They aren't supposed to be floppy like that. But you see, there's not a whole lot there. It's really pretty simple. It's funny too, because this little clamp would hold a battery, a 22.5 volt battery, like Clara Rockmore's instrument uses. The battery's long gone. But unlike Clara's, it uses an RCA style volume controlled tube. This is the 120 tube. It's a very pretty tube. Very hard to get these days. Leon Theremin didn't use this after 1930, so it's another reason to think that Leon Theremin did not design this particular theremin. You know, I'd like to say that he did, because it'd be worth more someday if I sell it. But it is the only complete unrestored Teletouch that we've found so far. There's a little pilot light and the power switch and standby switch. So in a few months I'll have this playing. We'll see what it sounds like.